Emma woke up before the sun every day. Her small apartment was cold, and the walls were thin. She shared it with an old cat named Milo, who always curled up beside her, purring softly. Emma didn't have much, but she had learned to live with. Little her alarm buzzed at 5:30 a.m., and by 6 o'clock, she was already walking to the train station. The city was still sleepy, but she was wide awake, ready to face another long day. She worked at a fancy restaurant called Le Vieux Chateau. It was the kind of place where people wore expensive clothes, drove shiny cars, and ordered meals with names Emma could barely pronounce. The restaurant was beautiful marble floors, golden chandeliers, soft music playing in the background. In the corner of the dining hall stood a grand piano, polished and untouched most days. Sometimes a hired pianist would play in the evenings, filling the room with calm and beauty. But on most nights, it just stood there, silent. Emma was one of the waitresses. She wore a crisp black and white uniform, kept her hair tied back, and always smiled, even when she was tired. Her job was simple: serve food, clear tables, refill glasses, and make sure the guests were happy. But it wasn't easy. It was long and tiring. She was always on her feet, running from one end of the restaurant to the other. Her hands ached from carrying heavy trays. Her cheeks hurt from forced smiles. But she did it every day without complaining. Most of the guests never looked at her twice. They were busy talking about business deals, vacations, or expensive wines. Some didn't even say thank you. They acted like she was invisible, like she didn't matter, but Emma didn't mind. She had grown used to being unnoticed. What they didn't know was that Emma had a secret. Inside her heart lived something beautiful, something no one in that restaurant could see. She loved music. Not just liked it, she loved it with her whole soul. When she was a little girl, she used to play the piano at her grandmother's house. Her grandma had an old wooden piano, a bit out of tune, but to Emma, it was magic. She would sit for hours, pressing the keys, creating little tunes, laughing when she made mistakes and trying again. Her grandma always encouraged her. "Psst. You have music in your hands, Emma," she used to say. "Don't ever let it go." But life had other plans. When her grandmother passed away, the piano was sold and the house was gone. Her family had money problems, and Emma had to grow up fast. Dreams were replaced with responsibilities. Music was pushed to the side. She got a job as soon as she could, working wherever someone would hire her. The restaurant job paid just enough. For rent and groceries, there was no time for piano, no money for lessons, and no space for dreams. Still, every time Emma passed by the grand piano in the restaurant, something inside her stirred. She would slow down, just for a second, and look at it. Her fingers would itch to touch the keys, just once. But she never did. It wasn't hers. It belonged to the restaurant, to the world of the rich, to people who wore shiny watches and spoke in soft, powerful voices. Not to a tired waitress with calloused hands. One evening, after her shift ended, Emma stayed behind to help clean up. The restaurant was quiet now. The guests had left, and the lights were dim. She wiped the tables, her eyes drifted again to the piano. It sat there, alone in the corner, like a sleeping giant. No one was watching. No one was around. Her heart pounded. Slowly, she walked toward it. She reached out and touched the keys very softly. The sound was gentle, like a whisper. Her fingers moved slowly at first, unsure. Then, like they remembered, they began to dance. A soft melody filled the empty room. She played an old tune, one her grandmother had taught her when she was 7, her eyes closed, and for a few minutes she was not a waitress. She was a girl in her grandmother's living room, laughing, playing, dreaming. Then she heard a sound of voice. Her eyes flew open. The manager was standing at the door. She froze, hands still on the keys. He didn't speak for a moment. He said, "I didn't know you could play." Emma's cheeks turned red. "I'm sorry," she whispered, standing up quickly. "I'll go." Didn't mean to, but the manager waved his hand. "It's all right. Just keep it short next time." She nodded, cleaned her hands, and left. The next day, everything went back to normal. The piano remained untouched, and Emma returned to her job, taking orders, smiling, running around. But something had changed inside her. Even though no one knew it, she had touched the piano again. She had felt alive. One morning she was setting tables when a woman at table 5 snapped her fingers and called her over. "You forgot the lemon in my tea," she said, frowning. "I'm so sorry." "Ma'am," Emma said gently, taking the cup back. The woman didn't even look at her. She kept talking to her friends, complaining about her husband's new boat. Emma smiled and walked away. She passed by the piano again. She looked at it. In her heart, a small voice whispered, "You don't belong here." But another voice, smaller and softer, whispered back, "Maybe you do." Emma had learned to live with that whisper. Every night after work, she would hum to herself on the walk home. Sometimes she wrote down little melodies in her notebook. She couldn't afford a piano, but her fingers still remembered. Her heart still held the music. She just needed a chance. That chance she didn't know was coming soon. It would begin on a rainy evening, one where thunder rolled above the city and lightning lit up the sky. The restaurant was full that night. Special event was planned, some charity dinner with very important guests. The tables were packed with people wearing tuxedos and gowns. Laughing loudly and clinking glasses, Emma was busier than ever, rushing from one table to another. Outside, rain tapped hard against the windows. The pianist who was hired to play hadn't arrived yet. The manager paced nervously near the kitchen, checking his watch again and again. Then his phone buzzed. He answered quickly and frowned. "Not coming," he muttered. "Car broke down. He's stuck in traffic." The owner of the restaurant looked angry. "We can't have a silent hall during this event," he hissed. "Find someone. Anyone." The manager looked around, helpless. That's when one of the line cooks whispered, "Emma knows how to play." The manager blinked. "The waitress?" "She's good," the cook said. "I've heard her late at night." The manager frowned. But with no other option, he walked over to her. Emma was pouring wine at table 7 when he tapped her shoulder. "Can you play?" She blinked. "What?" "The piano. Can you play something decent?" The pianist canceled. "We need music." Now, Emma's heart raced. Her hands were shaking. I haven't played in front of people in years." He looked desperate. "You don't have to be perfect. Just keep the room from falling silent." She hesitated. Then slowly, she nodded. She wiped her hands, fixed her hair quickly, and walked toward the piano. Every step felt heavy. People noticed her now. Some raised their eyebrows. A few whispered, "What's she doing?" Others just stared. Emma sat down, heart pounding like a drum. She closed her eyes. Her fingers hovered over the keys. Then she began to play, and in that moment, the entire room began to change. Emma sat on the piano bench with her hands shaking. The restaurant lights above her felt too bright, and the silence in the room was heavy. Dozens of eyes were now on her people dressed in suits and gowns, holding glasses of wine, wondering why a waitress was sitting at the piano. She stared at the keys, her breathing fast. Her heart felt like it would jump out of her chest. Her mind raced with fear. What if she played the wrong notes? What if they laughed? What if she froze? That somewhere deep inside her, something calm whispered, "Just play." She closed her eyes for a second and took a deep breath. Her fingers found the first notes of a song she had played many times as a child. It wasn't a famous piece. It wasn't something she had learned from a book. It was a soft, simple melody her grandmother used to hum while cooking dinner. A tune full of love, peace, and memory. Her fingers moved slowly at first, carefully. The first few notes floated into the room. Then, like a bird learning to fly again, the melody found its wings. Emma's hands began to move with ease. Her fear began to melt away. The restaurant, once full of noise-clinking glasses, conversations, laughter had gone completely quiet. No one spoke, no one moved. All ears were now tuned to the sound coming from the piano. The soft notes danced gently in the air, filling every corner of the room. People looked at each other in surprise. The music wasn't just beautiful. It was real, honest, full of emotion. It wasn't the usual polished showpiece played by trained professionals. It was something more raw, more human. The kind of sound that comes from the heart. Emma didn't see the crowd. She didn't see the shocked looks or the mouths slightly open in disbelief. She was far away in her childhood home with her grandma beside her, laughing and clapping. Her fingers moved on their own now, confident and steady. Her body swayed slightly with the rhythm. Her eyes remained closed. Minutes passed. When she finally lifted her hands off the keys, the room remained silent. For a brief moment, it felt like time had stopped. Then suddenly, silence broke not with murmurs or whispers, but with a wave of loud, genuine applause. People clapped like they meant it. Some stood up from their seats, a few even whistled. Emma opened her eyes slowly, confused at first. She blinked in surprise. The crowd was on their feet. She didn't know what to do. Her hands trembled again, but not from fear this time, from something else, feeling she hadn't felt in years. Recognition. Acceptance. The manager stood near the kitchen door, stunned. The restaurant owner leaned back in his chair, smiling with raised eyebrows. Where did she come from? He said quietly to a guest beside him. At one of the front tables sat an older gentleman with silver hair and kind eyes. He wiped a tear from his cheek. He had been a professional pianist in his younger years, but had never heard something so pure. In a long time, a well-dressed woman with a diamond necklace leaned forward and asked a waiter, "Who is she?" "That's just one of the waitresses," he replied, equally surprised. The applause lasted longer than Emma expected. She stood up slowly, gave a small, nervous bow, and returned to the kitchen. Her cheeks were red. Her heart was still racing. Inside the kitchen, the other staff waited for her. "You were amazing," said Rosa, one of the cooks. "Where did that even come from?" asked Liam, the dishwasher. Emma just smiled shyly. "I don't know. I just remembered." The rest of her shift felt like a dream. People were whispering her name. Some guests even called her back to their tables just to thank her. One man left $100 tip with a note that read, "Thank you for reminding me what real music sounds like." As the night ended and guests started leaving, the restaurant felt different. Emma wasn't just a waitress anymore. People looked at her now. They saw her. The restaurant owner approached her before she left. "That was incredible," he said. "Why didn't you tell anyone you could play like that?" Emma shrugged. "I didn't think it mattered." He looked thoughtful. "Would you consider playing for us again tomorrow night as our pianist?" Emma blinked. "Me? Yes. You have something special." "The guests loved it. We'd still pay you the same or more. You wouldn't even have to wait tables." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. "Think about it," he said. Walking away, Emma left the restaurant that night in the rain. Her jacket was thin and her shoes were soaked, but she didn't care. She walked with a lightness in her step, as if her feet weren't touching the ground. She didn't take the train home. She walked the whole way, even though it took an hour. Her mind kept playing the music again and again, like a dream she didn't want to wake up from. Back in her tiny apartment, Milo meowed and curled around her legs. She picked him up and hugged him tightly. "I played, Milo," she whispered. "I finally played." She didn't sleep much that night. Her mind was full of thoughts. What would happen if she played again? Could she really do this? Would people come just to hear her? What if it was just a lucky moment? The next evening, she returned to the restaurant, not in her waitress uniform, but in a simple black dress the manager had found for her. It wasn't expensive or flashy, but it made her look like she belonged behind the piano. The room was packed again. Some of the guests from the night before had returned. Word had spread. There was a buzz in the air. People were curious about. The waitress, pianist, Emma, sat down at the piano once more. This time, her hands were steadier. She began with a slow, emotional piece of melody she had written herself in her notebook during her train rides home. It was soft, full of longing and hope. Again, the room went still. Then she played a more upbeat tune, something lively and joyful. She smiled as she played, and some guests tapped their fingers on the table along with the rhythm. Few even closed, their eyes letting the music carry them. By the time she finished her second piece, the crowd was cheering again. That night, she didn't return to the kitchen. She stayed near the piano, talking to guests who came up to her. One woman said, "Your music reminded me of my mother." Another said, "You made my evening perfect." A man in a navy suit handed her his business card. "I work in music production," he said. "Let's talk sometime." Emma was overwhelmed. She had been invisible for so long, and now, all of a sudden, people saw her, not just as a server, but as an artist, as someone with a gift. On her way home that night, she smiled at strangers on the street. She hummed softly to herself. World looked different, brighter, full of possibility. She remembered the way the keys had felt under her fingers, the way the music had flowed through her. It had felt like flying for the first time in years. Emma felt like maybe, just maybe, her life was about to change. She didn't know what would come next, but she knew one thing for sure. She had taken a chance, and it had been worth it. The restaurant was never the same after that night. Emma, the quiet waitress, was no longer invisible. Now when she walked in, people turned to look at her. Not because she was famous, not yet, but because they had heard something special in her music, something that stayed with them even after they left. Every night, she came to the restaurant not to serve food, but to play the piano. And every night, people came just to hear her. The tables filled up faster than before. People called in early to reserve spots near the piano. Some guests returned 3 or 4 times in 1 week. They didn't just come for the food, they came for the feeling Emma's music gave them. Emma still wore simple clothes. She still spoke softly. She didn't walk around as if she were someone important. But inside her, something had changed. She was more confident now. When she sat down at the piano, her hands moved freely, her back straight, her heart open. The restaurant owner noticed the difference in the business. The tips were better. Reviews online mentioned Emma's name again and again. People wrote things like, "We came for the steak but stayed for the soul in that girl's piano. She made me cry, and I didn't even understand why." It's that Waitress Emma plays like she's telling a story without words. Emma didn't read the reviews, but her co-workers told her about them. Some staff still couldn't believe it. They remembered the girl who used to quietly refill glasses and wipe tables. Now, they watched her perform like she was born for the stage. One night a couple came in, dressed in all black. They looked different, serious, quiet, and professional. They didn't speak much, but they listened closely when Emma began to play. After her set, they asked to speak to her. One of them handed her a card. He was a music school director. The other worked for a performing arts center. They wanted to meet again, they said. They wanted to hear more. Emma was surprised, but she thanked them kindly. The next evening, another man approached her. He had watched her from the far end of the room. He had silver hair, gentle eyes, and a calm voice. His name was Charles Whitmore, and he used to be a concert pianist, once very famous in Europe. Now retired, he spent his time mentoring young artists. "I saw something in you," he told Emma softly. "When you play, you speak. You tell stories with no words." Emma looked down, unsure what to say. "I didn't study music," she said. Quietly, "I never had lessons." Charles smiled. "It doesn't matter. The piano doesn't care where you studied. It only cares if you mean what you play." And you do. He invited her to visit his studio. Not for an audition, just to talk. Maybe learn something. Emma agreed. The next week, she visited him in a small music room in the city. It was warm and filled with shelves of sheet music and instruments. He had a grand piano, older than the one in the restaurant, but it sounded even better. He asked her to play whatever she wanted. She chose a soft, emotional melody she had made up 2 years ago, sitting on her fire escape one summer evening. When she finished, Charles was quiet. Then he said, "Would you let me teach you?" Emma blinked. "Teach me, yes," he said. "Not because you're not already wonderful, but because you could be even more. And I'd be honored to help you." Emma had never had a real teacher before. She nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. And so she started going to Charles's studio once a week, taught her new techniques, helped her read music better, and showed her how to polish her own songs. But most of all, he helped her believe in herself. Back at the restaurant, her music grew richer. Her fingers moved with more strength, her rhythm smoother, her confidence clear. The guests noticed. The staff noticed. She had always been good, but now she was becoming something more. One evening, a couple asked if she had a CD they could buy. Emma laughed and said no. Another person asked if she had a social media page or videos online. She shook her head. You should, they said. The world needs to hear you. Emma didn't know how to do those things. She didn't know about followers or online recordings or music platforms. But a younger waitress, Mia, offered to help. She recorded one of Emma's performances on her phone, just Emma, in her simple dress, playing a slow, emotional tune. With her eyes closed, Mia posted the video on the restaurant's page, along with a caption that said, "Our own Emma Pure Magic." Overnight, everything changed. The video was shared hundreds of times, then thousands. Comments flooded in. "I have goosebumps. Who is she? This is the most honest music I've heard in years. Where can I hear more of her work?" Emma didn't know what to say. Her phone, which rarely rang, now buzzed every hour. Journalists called. Music bloggers wanted interviews. Local radio station invited her for a live performance. A man from a small record label reached out with a simple offer, a chance to record her music in a real studio. Emma felt like she was in a dream, but she stayed grounded. Every night, she still played at the restaurant. She still said good morning to the cooks, helped clean up her space, and greeted the staff like friends. One night, a little girl came into the restaurant with her parents. She had short curly hair, big glasses, and carried a small notebook.
Actor.
Emma's set. The girl walked up shyly and said, "I want to be like you one day." Emma bent down and smiled. "You already are," she said gently. She signed the girl's notebook and drew a little piano beside her name. That moment stayed with Emma longer than any online comment or business card. She had once been that little girl, full of dreams, unsure, waiting for someone to believe in her. Now, she had become someone others looked up to. But it wasn't just about fame. Emma didn't care about becoming rich or getting on big stages. She played because it healed her, because it was the only way she knew how to speak all the things she couldn't say with words. And now, people were listening. One night, the restaurant owner sat beside her after her performance. "You know," he said, "we've had hundreds of people walk through this place, but no one ever made the walls feel like they were singing." Emma laughed softly. "I used to clean these walls," she said, "and now you make them shine in a different way," he replied. That week, Charles called her with news. A local concert hall was hosting a special night for unknown talents. He had submitted a clip of Emma's performance without telling her hand she had been chosen. Emma was shocked. "Me, a concert hall?" "Yes," he said. "A real audience. A real piano. A chance to show the world what I already see in you." Emma felt nervous, scared, but also excited. The date was set. The days leading up to the concert were filled with practice, rehearsals, and quiet walks in the park to calm her nerves. She didn't tell many people, but the restaurant staff found out and planned to be there. They even closed early that night so they could all attend. On the evening of the performance, Emma stood behind the curtain, dressed in a long, flowing black gown that Mia helped her pick out. Her hands were cold. Her heart thudded loudly. Then the curtain rose, the lights came on, and the room waited. She sat at the grand piano, took a breath, and began to play. It was quiet at first, soft, gentle notes that told the story of a girl who had waited tables, who had walked home in the rain, who had once been invisible. Then the music grew bolder, filled with color, joy, and power. It told the story of finding light in the dark, of being seen, of believing. The audience listened, silent and still. Some closed their eyes. Some had tears rolling down their cheeks. When she finished, the applause didn't come right away. There was a pause just long enough to feel like the world had stopped. Then it exploded. People stood, cheered, clapped with everything they had. Emma stood, bowed, and smiled. In that moment, she knew this was only the beginning. The lights from the concert hall still danced in Emma's mind, even days after her performance. She would sit alone sometimes, remembering the way the audience had looked at her, not with judgment, not with confusion, but with something new. Respect. They had listened. Really listened. and they had clapped like they were proud of her, was something she had never felt before in her life. Back at the restaurant, the atmosphere had changed completely. Everyone knew what had happened. The video of her concert had now been posted online. Someone in the audience had recorded a short part of her performance and shared it. That video went viral, just like the one Mia had shared earlier, but this time, it's even faster. Overnight, the video reached more than 1 million views. People were commenting in every language. Some called her the girl with the soul-touching hands. Others said they hadn't cried for music in years until they heard Emma play. Offers started pouring in. One message came from a popular morning TV show. They wanted Emma to come and perform live. Another came from a well-known producer who had worked with famous classical musicians. He said her performance reminded him of the early days of some of the greatest pianists. He wanted to help her record an album. Emma couldn't believe what was happening. All these people wanted something from her. Her music, her story, her presence. It was exciting, but also a little scary. She had spent so many years just trying to survive, keeping her head down, not dreaming too big. And now, the world was asking her to dream without limits. Charles, her mentor, sat with her one day after a long practice session. He could see the worry in her eyes. "You look tired," he said gently. "I am," Emma admitted. "Everything is happening so fast. I don't know what to say yes to or what to avoid. I'm scared I'll make the wrong choice." He nodded. "You don't have to say yes to everything. Only say yes to what keeps your music honest." Emma thought about that for a long time. She didn't want to become someone fake. She didn't want her music to turn into something cold and businesslike. She played because she loved it, because it helped her breathe. Still, she knew the time had come to take the next step. With Charles's help, she said yes to recording an album, her first ever. Not a big, expensive album with an orchestra or fancy sound effects. Just her and the piano. Her own songs written over years, each one telling a part of her journey. The producer, named Leo, welcomed her warmly into the small studio. He was kind and respectful, always asking what she needed. He didn't try to change her sound or force her to play in a certain way. He just listened and guided her softly. Emma spent weeks recording. Some days were easy, some days hard. She cried once. In the middle of a song, Leo let her take a break, and when she came back, her music had even more emotion in it. They named the album Before They Saw Me, a title Emma came up with. It was about the years she spent playing music in silence, before anyone noticed her. When the album was finished, Leo helped her release it online. They didn't expect anything huge. Maybe a few thousand people would listen. Maybe some would buy it. But what happened next surprised them both. The album reached the top of the classical music charts within a week. Thousands of people downloaded it. Music lovers, teachers, students, even people who said they never liked piano music before, wrote messages saying how deeply her music touched them. Emma sat on her bed one night,
holding Milo, reading those messages.
Some people said her music helped them through grief. Others said they listened while watching sunsets or walking in the rain. One man said he played her music every night to help his baby sleep. She cried quietly that night, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming feeling that something beautiful had happened. But even as the fame grew, Emma stayed the same. She still visited the restaurant. She still talked with Mia and Rosa and Liam. Sometimes she even helped clean up after hours, just like before. She didn't wear uniforms anymore. She always carried that same kindness and humility with her. One day a customer came in, a young man who looked nervous and shy. He asked to meet Emma. When she came to the table, he stood up and handed her a small package. Inside was a drawing of Emma at the piano, sketched with charcoal. It was beautiful. "I'm an artist," he said softly. "I can't play music, but when I saw your video, I felt something. I wanted to give something back." Emma hugged him gently and thanked him with tears in her eyes. More and more people started visiting the restaurant not to eat, but just to feel closer to where Emma's story had begun. Some sat at the table near the piano and whispered, "This is where she used to play." It all felt surreal to Emma. She had not changed her path to become famous. All she did was take a chance. Follow her heart and play the piano like it was her only way to speak. But people had listened in now. Her music had become a bridge, connecting her to thousands. One afternoon, Charles gave her another surprise. "You've been invited to play at the National Theater," he said. "It's a full concert.
All?
Yours, 3,000 seats." Emma stared at him in shock. 3,000, he smiled. "Yes, and I believe every single one will be filled."
Dad.
She didn't know what to say. Fear and excitement twisted together inside her. The days leading up to the concert were filled with long practices, outfit fittings, interviews, and phone calls. Emma was tired, but she never lost focus. She kept reminding herself, play honestly. That's all that matters. On the night of the concert, she stood backstage in a long blue gown, her fingers trembling slightly. The audience was full exactly as Charles had said. Among them were famous musicians, critics, teachers, and people who had traveled from different cities just to see her. The lights dimmed. Her name was announced. She walked onto the stage, took her seat at the piano, and breathed deeply. Then she played. Her hands moved with grace and power. She played her own compositions, first soft, emotional pieces full of childhood memories, lonely nights, the silent strength she had carried for years. Then she played something new, an energetic piece full of hope and fire, something that made the audience sit up straighter and smile at the end. She played the melody she had first performed at the restaurant, the song her grandmother used to hum. When the last note rang through the theater, she held her hands still on the keys for just a moment longer. The room was silent. Then, as before, the silence turned into thunderous applause. But this time, something else happened. The audience rose to their feet, row by row, clapping loudly, cheering, some even shouting her name. Emma stood up, tears in her eyes, and bowed. It was the biggest moment of her life so far. Backstage, she hugged Charles tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know how this all happened," he smiled. "You found the courage to be seen, and that's how it happened." Later that night, when she was alone again, Emma sat by a window and watched the city lights. She thought about the little girl she used to be, the one who played on an old piano in her grandmother's house. She thought about the years she had gone unnoticed, the long shifts, the sore feet, the heavy trays, and she thought about how all of it had led her here, not because she chased fame, but because one night someone gave her a chance. She promised herself she would never forget that, and deep in her heart, she knew her journey had only just begun. Emma had played in front of thousands now. She had walked on grand stages, recorded her own music, and received standing ovations. Her name was in magazines, her videos were watched by millions. And music schools that once wouldn't have noticed her now sent her letters asking if she would visit, speak, or even teach. But none of it changed who she really was. Fame came quietly, not in the way she had once imagined it. It wasn't about red carpets or being chased by reporters. For Emma, fame was different. It came when someone walked up to her and said, "Your music helped me." Or when someone whispered, "I felt less alone because of your song." That was the kind of recognition that truly mattered to her, even though she was now known as a rising star in the music world. Emma still lived in her small apartment with Milo. She still made her own tea in the morning. She still walked to the train station when she didn't feel like taking a car. She still carried a small notebook in her bag, full of new melodies she would hum into her phone while riding the subway. But one thing had changed. Now she had the power to help others. She wanted to use it. One afternoon, Emma returned to the restaurant where everything had started. She hadn't been there in weeks. Not because she didn't want to, but because her schedule had been full. When she walked in, the staff welcomed her like family. Mia hugged her tight. Rosa wiped her eyes and said, "You're still our Emma." Emma laughed and said, "Always will be." They sat at their favorite little table in the back, sharing stories and jokes. The piano still sat in its corner, clean and shining. Emma walked over to it slowly, touched the keys, and smiled. I want to do something, she said. They looked up. I want to help people like me. The quiet ones. The ones who have talent but no money. The ones who are afraid they'll never be seen. Mia's eyes lit up. Like a music program? Emma nodded. Exactly. Free lessons. Instruments. A safe space to learn and express. Maybe even performances where nobody's judged. That week, Emma used the money from her first album to start a small foundation. She called it The Sound Inside. She didn't want it to be big or fancy. She just wanted it to be real. She reached out to local schools, music teachers, and community centers. Charles helped her build a team. Mia helped her manage events. Even the restaurant owner donated money and space for their first gathering. Their first class had only 8 kids. Some were shy, some noisy, some scared to even touch the piano. But Emma sat with each of them. She showed them how to listen to the notes, to their hearts, to the silence between sounds. And soon the room was full of music again. More children. Joined every month. Some brought their own instruments. Others came with nothing but a dream. Emma made sure they all felt welcome. One girl named Leela reminded Emma of herself. She was quiet, always looking down, always sitting alone. But when Emma gave her a keyboard, the girl's fingers began to dance. Her music was soft, but it spoke loudly. After her first performance, she told Emma, "I've never felt this happy before." Emma smiled. That's what music does. Finds the part of you that hurts and helps it breathe. Emma didn't stop performing either. She played at schools, charity events, small-town theaters, and even on street corners when she felt like it. She didn't care about the size of the crowd. She only cared that someone was listening. Once, she visited a hospital for children with cancer. The nurses led her into a quiet room where a little boy lay in bed, weak but awake. His name was Josh, and he loved music, but had never seen a piano in real life. Emma sat beside him, held his hand gently, and said, "Would you like me to play something just for you?" His smile was weak, but it was real. Emma brought in a small keyboard and played one of her softest pieces. Josh closed his eyes and whispered, "It sounds like a story." "It is," Emma said. "It's your story." She kept visiting him every week. Sometimes she played. Sometimes they just talked. On his birthday, she brought him a keyboard of his own. When he played his first few notes, she clapped like he had just performed on the biggest stage in the world. People began to talk about Emma not just as a pianist, but as someone who gave back. She wasn't just a girl with talent. Girl with heart. One evening, during a quiet walk in the park, Emma sat on a bench and looked at the sky. She thought about the journey she had taken, the lonely nights, the hard work, the fear, the one chance that changed everything. She remembered that stormy night when the pianist didn't show up and the manager had asked her, "Can you play?" That moment had changed her life. It reminded her of something Charles once told her. Sometimes, life opens a door when you least expect it. The question is, are you brave enough to walk through? Emma had walked through, and now she wanted to help others find their doors. A few months later, her foundation hosted a concert for young performers. All the students from The Sound Inside were invited to play on stage. Their families came. The restaurant offered to cater the food for free. The theater was full. Emma sat in the front row, clapping for each child as they played. Some made mistakes. Some got nervous. But none of them gave up. When Lila finished her performance, Emma stood up and gave her a big hug. "You were incredible," she said. Lila looked up at her. "I was so scared." Emma smiled. "So was I, but we'd play anyway, right?" Lila nodded. "Right." At the end of the concert, someone asked Emma if she would play just one piece. She hesitated. "This night is for them," she said. "They want to hear you," the children begged. So Emma sat down at the piano. She looked at all the faces in the crowd, young and old, students and friends, people who had once ignored her, and people who had helped her grow, and she played. This time the melody was different. It wasn't sad. It wasn't even soft. It was bright and full of energy, celebration. She called it the sound of being seen. The crowd clapped along. The children danced near the stage. In that moment, Emma felt more alive than ever. Later, that night, as the theater emptied, Charles sat beside her. "You did something amazing," he said. Emma looked around at the empty chairs, the soft stage lights, the instruments packed away. "No," she said. "We did something amazing." Smiled, and it's just the beginning. Emma looked down at her hands, the same hands that once poured water, cleared plates, and folded napkins. Now, they created music. Now, they changed lives. She had once believed she was invisible, but all along, her music had been waiting to be heard, and when the world finally listened, it changed everything.